Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you for that, Zach. And with me today is my good friend, Jeff Dangelo, who's managing partner at Lighthouse. Good to have you back on the show. Jeff, how are you, my friend?
Great, Michael. How are you? Thanks for
I,
having me.
I'm doing great. So tell us quickly a little bit of background about yourself and a little bit about Lighthouse before we jump into this.
Yeah, it's great. Jeff D'Angelo, I was been in logistics for 20 years. About 7 years ago, I founded a company called Turvo. So it's a software platform. A lot of people now know what that is, especially going to FreightWaves, which is great. And the goal for for Turvo was to say, how do we give organizations a common tool set to work together? Right? Think of all the silos you sort of need to break down in the industry. Uh, 95% of the people you work with in logistics are really not in your company. So we try to make it easy for people to work together through a digital way. Recently, I left Turvo and I joined a company called Lighthouse, and they're actually a Turvo customer. And our goal at Lighthouse is to say, how do we create transparency through technology for both our customers and also our carriers? So the company is we have a brokerage, we have managed transportation, we have trucking. So there's a variety of services we sort of offer, but our goal is to offer it digitally to our clients.
Right. So I understand. So Lighthouse has asset and not asset based. It's warehousing, it's trucking, it's brokerage. It's got all those type of things. And like you said, what you were
That's
doing
right.
at Turvo there is bringing that transparency, connecting all these different data points, right? So let's talk about that. The digitization, I guess, of logistics, right? And how difficult that can be. You mentioned silos, right? And we've talked about that many different times. Can you talk to that a little bit? First of all, what does digitization mean? It's this hot button that people throw about all over the place. What is digitization and why are silos of data important to overcome?
Let me start with digitization and I'll go to silos. There's two words that I think are super interesting. One is digitization and one is digitalization. So digitization is actually taking stuff that's manually done. So think of those check calls that logistics people make. How do we automate those through technology? And we sort of put those into software, put those into some kind of technology first versus doing it manually. Digitalization is actually taking those concepts and creating new business models from that technology. And so when we talk about new business models, the most exciting thing for me in this industry is actually seeing all the new business models that can be created using technology as a way to sort of start those and create those. From a silo perspective, something I've always been fascinated with is, the reason why silos are created is really a software problem. It's the fact that, every software that's created in this industry, and I've talked about it at length, both on air and off air, they were created for one organization to use and operate, and they weren't really built for your network to work with and engage. So that's why you see things and concepts like portals say, hey, come and work with me. The problem with portals is that all you're doing is re-siloing the way in which your customer or your carrier work with you. They have to log into someone else's portal to work with them. And so for us at Lighthouse, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, we've got the only sort of network technology in this space. How do we give customers a way to work with us, but also work with other providers that they might use on a daily basis?
Yeah, when you talk about those, it brings to mind that you, as an organization, if you're trying to digitize or digitalize, you really need like this digital GOS plan, right? You need to understand what you're doing. Otherwise, you've got these different departments or different verticals within your company utilizing different software that may not speak to each other. But once you've overcome that, you've then got to look into, let's say, automating manual processes. Can you speak to that, the hurdles that you run into there in the minefield?
Yeah, I think if you start from scratch, it's much easier to sort of build build things from the ground up to say, hey, we're going to do it this way, right? But if you've got a big business, and our business is a nice sized business, then you have to take sort of behavior that's been done over years and years and years and shift it into a different way to work, and that's hard. It's like, when I first moved from local email to Gmail Online, it was hard for me to make the switch, right? You just used to
Yeah.
certain things. But once you make the switch, you realize, wow, I can do my email from anywhere. It's easier to use. In the case of using a software to say, hey, let's go back to that track and trace example. If I want, someone to call a truck driver and say, "Hey, where are you?" That's very different than saying, "Hey, Mr. Carrier, Mrs. Carrier, you're going to use this new tool to work with me, and I never have to talk to you again unless there's an exception." It's a different kind of conversation. So for us, we're trying to go through and create those muscles, right? And that takes a little bit of time.
It certainly does, and one of the things that also comes to mind with that, Jeff, is overcoming that. Uh, or do you find this, anyways? Is that employees, as you uh, get rid of manual processes, you automate these manual processes, people lose a certain sense of accomplishment throughout the day, right? I mean, even whether if they realize it or not, these menial tasks that they're doing, managing their inbox, for instance, they feel like they've done something, right? Does that become a hurdle?
I think it's giving them a sense of let's move you to the more valuable work that we want you to do.
Right.
I think you have to augment that with value, like value created work. So, for example, instead of calling a driver to say, "Where are you?" I want you to have a different conversation with the customer to say, "How do we add value in different ways with you?" versus the more
Mhm.
transactional approach to say, "Hey, do you have a shipment I can move? Let's talk about how we can sort of really affect your business in a different way." And that sort of higher level work is what the evolution of logistics should sort of move to, because a lot of these remedial tasks will either be automated, sort of through technology, and or be offset by sort of some offshore work that's lower cost. So I think some of that work, hopefully will go through digitally, and then we can really focus on the higher level tasks.
Right. So talk about what you were talking about there, the conversation between the employee with the driver versus the value add with that customer, the business model alignment or aligning your processes with the customer success. Can you talk about that a little bit in this process of digitizing the logistics industry?
Yeah, I think what we want to do, and I think the leadership at Lighthouse was amazing to bring me on and to say, hey, how do we look through a more digital lens? And so part of that digital lens is we got to look at the technology, we got to look at the business model, we got to look at how we monetize, how we work with our carriers and our customers. And so our industry has to evolve. Like it just has to evolve over time. And so one of the biggest challenges with our industry is that the business models that are out there are typically always making the spread, which is what you bill a customer versus what you pay a carrier, right? And that actually doesn't align with the success of the carrier or the customer. It doesn't say, hey, the more money I make, the better you are, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer. It actually says, hey, I'm really focused on margin, or I'm focused on, how much money can I make today? Versus saying, hey, how do I align when I make money, you're more efficient, right? Or when I make money, we've saved you money. And or we say, hey, there's a flat fee and we're offering so much value for that flat fee that it doesn't even matter, right? It doesn't matter that we're making X percent because we're offering too much value. So the goal that we're trying to sort of bring to life is to work with customers at a different level and create a new differentiated business model that aligns with the customer success.
So it sounds really, really important to be able to, what you're saying there is to be able to prove that value to that customer, right? Because as you become much more efficient, you become much more profitable, and that transparency of that can cause a little rift maybe there, or some angst that happens between the customer and yourselves. But educating that customer on that value, talk about how important that piece is in digitizing, right? You're not just a bunch of
Yeah.
people with phones and calling carriers, right?
It's really understanding what the problems the customer has beyond moving the shipment, right? So we have customers that spend a fortune on back office services, the same services that we have in our company and the same services that other carriers have in their companies, right? So how do we do that work once and the customer gets the value so we can help them drive down their costs? So so the idea, Michael, is to say, can we offer the same services that we provide internally back to the customer, right? To provide much more value than just saying, hey, you have an available truck today. And I think if we can have those different conversations, then I think we can offer that value in a different way. And that's sort of what I'm bringing. I think some of the things that inspire this are some of the new business models that are out there. Take a look at what the Emerge guys are doing. I think it's super interesting. They've created a way to give a software to a customer, and they're monetizing, per transaction versus, they're not even managing the freight, but they're offering value and saying, how can we help the customer drive down costs?
Yeah,
We're going to do the same
absolutely.
thing. We're going to do the same thing.
That's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. So, Jeff, how do people reach out to you, connect, and learn more about Lighthouse?
Yeah, just go to our website, www.golighthouse.ai. We just went through a great new rebranding, so we're trying to again try to bring digital sort of to the industry in a different way with a differentiated business model. Or you can reach out to me at jeff@golighthouse.ai.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff. We'll catch up again really, really soon.